Got it.
Hello, beautiful Yeye Luisah, and another really inspiring conversation about transitioning and death. And what I really like to kind of talk about today is, what is death? I mean, really, what is death? Is it death of the body? Is it death of the cells? Is it death of the memories? Is it death of the soul, the spirit? What is death in terms of, it's so multifaceted? And yet, what is it? Which part of it is the one that gets us and really makes us feel so grief-stricken or so despondent or depressed, or really go into the dark side? Which part of that? Because I'm sure that the spirit part of it is light. It's not, it's not that heaviness. Whereas, what is it then? Is it the memories, Yeye Luisah, or is it the body itself? And it's either been so diseased or so abused, or what is it?
Well, when I'm teaching the courses on ritual and ancestor reverence and stuff, we look at the three universal aspects of the rituals around death. First of all, there is care of the corpse. The body, the spirit has left the body, and different cultures have different beliefs about care of the corpse, which speaks to their ideas about the spirit. So, you had, for example, ancient Egypt, where the heart of the person was weighed against an ostrich feather, right? A
Right,
heart was put in a jar,
right,
an alabaster jar, and it was weighed against an ostrich feather. And that belief was that if the heart was heavy, if the person had not lived the 42 negative confessions of Ma'at, they were guilty, they were dying with guilt, and so their soul would drop into the mouth of Amut, the crocodile goddess.
right.
Okay, so care of the body with mummification and all of that was thought to be related to what was happening with the soul. In other places, we have like among the Tibetans in the high hills, what they would do is chop the body up and leave it for the animals. Okay, so that's not a lot of preserving attention on the physical body, yet it's returning it to nature by letting the animals eat it. And then you have people who cremate, right? That's not a whole lot of concern about the body, but how the ashes are dispersed is another thing. And in Indonesia, I believe it's Bali, there's a very interesting tradition of maintaining the soulless body in the house where the people died until once a year a big bamboo horse is made, and everybody who's died that year, their corpse is put in the horse, and the horse is set on fire. So there's all kinds of beliefs about what should happen to the corpse. Then, oh no, there's two others that's very interesting, that sort of bridge that corpse spirit thing. In Eastern Europe, there are two traditions that are important. One is called the sin eater. So a man who dies can have fruit laid all over his body, and his transgressions in this life are repeated. And then a young man eats that fruit off of his dead body so that he takes that man's sins away from him so that he can go into the next realm clean, right? Of course, the young man who's the sin eater, that's a hereditary position. You got to clean after, you got to cleanse your intestines afterwards and all of that kind of stuff. and the other one is called the weddings of the dead, where it's believed that a man who dies without a wife and children can't enter heaven. So a woman who has lost her husband and maybe has children is brought in and married to the corpse so that he can enter heaven as a married man. Now, that's that body to spirit sort of interlude. Then there is, what are the rituals for the spirit? You know,
Before we
in
go into that, can I just ask you, what is the background of being married and entering heaven? Because there's like so many of us on the planet right now, and we're not married. So does
right.
it mean we
Well,
will?
the idea is that if you're not married and you don't have children, you're not contributing to the continuation of the species. And for some people, that is a sin. I mean, we now don't, because of overpopulation, we think having a few children or no children is blessed. But earlier in human history, when the species was just trying to survive, and life was so hard, and babies were subject to die early, then the whole business of having children was considered most precious because it continues the race. If nobody had children, human beings would disappear. So the continuity of the race was dependent on that. That has changed now because there are so many of us that our numbers, along with greed, is what's killing us, is what threatens
Exactly,
to
that's what I was going to
end.
say. There are 8
Yes,
billion of
threatening
us
us.
now on the
Yeah,
planet.
we have more people now than the planet needs, especially because some people have all the resources and others don't. That imbalance, and all of it is extracting from the earth, which makes it a quote unquote sin now, a crime now. That wasn't so in the past, and those traditions come out of the period when human beings was, shall we say, scarce or not as populous as we are now.
So yeah,
Okay.
Luisah, that also brings up the point that sin and the definition of sin keeps changing. There's no
Absolutely.
definitive, it's all based on what are the requirements in the time and situation that we live in. So
That's right.
therefore, this whole concept of heaven and hell
Yeah.
just, it doesn't hold, it's not a solid concept. It
No, and it changes from culture to culture. Like the popular, because Western religion has dominated the world. If you say sin, people think of hell with a horned being sitting around some fire frying you. And if you say heaven, then you get a picture of people walking on streets of gold and sucking down milk and honey. And neither one of those are true for me in my tradition. We don't believe any of that. And, the research shows those who have experienced what they call life after death, where people are dead for a
Mhm.
period of time and then they come back, people have different reports about what they saw on the other side. And it all has to do with what was in their consciousness, you know?
Exactly. That's
Yeah,
exactly what the Buddhists say. They say
yeah.
that actually this whole lifetime is a preparation for death, for your
Mm-hmm.
next life, because
Mm-hmm.
it's the last stage of your consciousness before you pass that is going to determine what you go into in the
That's
next
right.
time space. So
That's right.
that's why I wanted to bring up this whole subject of what is death, because if we're actually living to prepare for the next life, then
Mm-hmm.
that means that we have this concept that we're living, but we're not really living, then are we?
Why not?
Because unless we wake up every single day in the
Mm-hmm.
morning and
Mm-hmm.
we have a fresh perspective on life,
Mm-hmm.
then what we're really doing is revisiting
Mm-hmm.
old patterns and old memories
Mm-hmm.
that we can then work out to prepare for the next life.
Mm-hmm.
Do you see what I mean? So that's, this concept of living is actually only truly a concept of unknotting, untying,
Mm-hmm.
making sense, and re rewriting
Mm-hmm.
things that we've already kind of lived or our ancestors have lived.
Oh yeah. Now, yeah, the ancestral patterns are very, very clear. I mean, in my tradition, you're supposed to get up every morning and greet your ancestors and ask for your guidance for the day, right? But that guidance is based on what human life has been, and each day is a continuation of what human life can be. See, that's the other thing, is it's not just repeating ancestral patterns, but it is your responsibility to be constantly co-creating,
But you've got to have
constantly
such a
co-creating.
high level of awareness to be able to do that.
Yeah, yeah.
Because like you wake up in the morning and the lives that we lead are so
Hmm.
based around the next paycheck. When's the next food going to come in? What are we going to do? It's all based around survival, and
Yep.
it's not just a mindset. Yeah, Luisah, it's like different now. Even with the people who are of very high consciousness, having
Hmm.
having a physical crisis or a physical calamity come
Hmm.
into your life or come into your community,
Yeah.
you're going to start, like, again looking at life from the perspective of physical survival, because
You
that's what
have
we
to.
address. Exactly.
Yeah, I mean, you have to, as long as you are still in your body,
Right.
as long as you are still in your body, the needs of the body are going to be under consideration. Now, meditation helps being able to, you know, reach into other realms while still in the body is important. But when we look at ancestors, what we see is spirits who took a body, had an experience, left the body, but is still concerned about those of us who are in the body, which is why we consult them about what we are doing while we're in this body.
So
There's
yeah,
no
yeah.
way
Do
around the
they
body.
have, from their angle and their
Hmm.
perspective, because they're not in the body, do they
Anymore.
have a different take for us that we can seek their guidance?
Yeah.
Can you talk
Yeah.
a little bit about that?
Well, let me say this. Let me take myself as an example, because everybody's on a different, we're all on this life journey, but we're kind of traveling different roads.
Right.
Okay. Depending upon who you agreed to become. See, before my spirit came to earth, I made certain agreements with the ancestors that I would be a particular kind of person, that I would do particular things, and I asked them to make sure I have the resources to fulfill this. This is very interesting because this is one of the assignments I have going on in my classes. Okay, so one of the things that I agreed to was healing the wounding between human beings. That was something I agreed to, okay? And so that makes of me somebody who wants to know as much as possible about everybody's culture, everybody's belief, everybody's concern. Other people who have what we call a different agolona, they have a different road. Their vision of me is How come she associate with everybody? Something's wrong with her. She should be, concentrating on this, that, and the other. But that's their road and that's their assignment. My assignment is to reach out. So when I go to my ancestors, I'm not just talking to the people in my bloodline. You see what I'm saying? I'm talking to as many ancestors in as many cultures as I can in order to understand. Like right now, I have a dilemma that a woman who has come to me for spiritual guidance is descended from a group of people who are native to Guam, right? I
Okay.
have to learn their language in order to help her. Me,
I love
a
it.
little black girl from Louisiana, what am I doing learning this indigenous language?
But that's amazing.
It's amazing, and when I realized that I needed to learn her culture in order to help her, it didn't come rational. It came where I was doing a ritual for her and I was hearing these voices and I couldn't tell what they were saying, but I knew that I needed to know. And then I asked her, "Where are your people from?" And when she said, "We're indigenous Guam," it was like, whoa, okay, I got to learn something about that. The next thing that happened was I found a Chamorro language book for children.
Yeah.
So I might be 74 years old, but I have to treat myself like a child.
But we are
You know,
children,
we are, I
especially if
often do
we're
that
on the path of learning new things, we are
with
children,
children.
right?
And that's what I tell people. If you're trying to learn something and it seems too complex for you, go get a book about it from the children's library. It'll tell you what's happening.
Exactly.
Yeah, so they have some of them who are elevated, who lived a good life, who learned a lot, and who care about us. That's what we call the Class A ancestors. Those are the ones we call upon to assist us. The Class B ones are injured. They need our help. We have to help heal them. They didn't live well or they didn't die well. You see what I'm saying? So we deal with it, we deal with it that way. There's two unfortunate assumptions, neither one is true. Some people believe when you die, you go to heaven, and from there on out, you are perfect. Nope, that's not true, as far as I know. And others say, when you die, you go to hell and you're forever damned. No, it's dynamic. The energy is always moving. The
Okay.
energy is
I've
always moving.
I've got a question which
Mm,
I know that I've been asked quite a few times, and that is that what you're talking about, assignments, can also be called contracts that we come
mhm,
down with that we need to fulfill. Now, how much of those, or is it very, very personal and subjective, can we actually change? And how much of those
mhm,
contracts need to be fulfilled?
mhm, mhm, mhm. That's amazing because this is the question that we are addressing. I have a special advanced class for people who I feel have come to a level where they can expand their consciousness. There's what there is what we have that is birthright, okay? And then that's what we come in with, that's what we've agreed to, that's what we've inherited. And then there is what you have by right of consciousness, by your willingness to learn even more, by your willingness to embrace, to investigate. So, my people who say, well, I was born into a long line of poor people, or I was born into a long line of alcoholics, or a long line of people in abusive relationships. I say, The reason you're sitting here with me is because you are the person who is going to crack that code. You're the one who's going to change it. You're the change agent so that that negative energy does not pass on to the next generation. And that is a hard job to take all of that on. It involves a whole lot of work, and there are not a lot of people doing it. You know, a lot of people are just repeating the same patterns of the past. Like you said, they're
It,
just doing it, doing it, doing it.
it's a
But
tough job, though.
if you're conscious and you're willing to do the work, I believe in conscious evolution. I believe that as a species, we can become a better creature, but we have to be thinking about it and we have to be working on it and we have to be willing to be changed.
That is the key.
That's the key.
Everywhere, it's about receptivity. It's about sincerity.
Yep.
It's about just willing. And I think if, but there is the other side of it too that I've seen in my own life as well, and in other people's, yeah, Luisah, is that, you know, even if you don't want it, if you signed up for it, you can't do anything else but that,
Got
because
to.
it will keep coming back to you.
Right.
And if you run away from it and you say, okay, because the reality is, yeah, that we are more than just that. That may be
Mm-hmm.
a particular contract, but there are
Mm-hmm.
other parts of us
Yep.
that are freer, that we can
Mm-hmm.
go and do other things. And
Yep.
I think a lot of people, you know, when they think about working on themselves, and really sincere self-development, they keep getting pulled back by some
Mm-hmm.
contracts.
Mm-hmm.
And they don't realize that, at least I feel, is that that piece is actually the integral core piece for the rest of the whole that they
Hmm.
feel so free to do. It's like once they also resolve and break through that
Mm-hmm.
piece, then all the rest just comes into this incredible order,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
and everything seems like miraculous.
Right.
But it
Right.
wasn't. It's that we worked through it and came to a point where it it got released, and
Mm-hmm.
therefore everything lightens up.
Well, I think the language that I sometimes use is the crisis that looks like a breakdown. If you surrender to it, it becomes a breakthrough. And you break through to greater things. I mean, in my book, Jambalaya, there's a story called That Needy Winter, right? And that is the story of the year I tried to kill myself and didn't die. I did not die. Instead of dying, huh, my spirit sat on the ceiling and told me, you know, this dying shit, this is bullshit. You have things to do, right? You have stuff to do. So we're not having this little death drama. We're not having it. Get back in your, I'm coming back into your body. And from here on out, you're going to stretch and grow. Now, it wasn't easy. I was crazy for a month. Slept all day and screamed all night. And my sister, bless her heart, she didn't know what was going on. Otherwise, she would have put me in the mental hospital. But there is a thing where we resist growing and changing. We don't realize that that's what we're doing. But the way it works, if you are in resistance to the growth that you're supposed to happen, all kinds of things hit you upside the head to make you know this has to be cracked. Okay. This has to be cracked. And I talk to my students about surrender is an interesting word. surrender to your evolution. Don't resist it. Understand this is, what you did before was probably the best you could imagine, but now it's time to graduate to bigger things, better things, expanding. And it's very, very hard for people, especially if you're carrying, excuse me, what's called transgenerational trauma. You know, I often find that the young woman who comes to me because she was incested went to her mother who didn't do anything about it, but I find out that mama was incested and grandmother was incested, and I can trace it all the way back to rape on the plantation.
Mm.
You see what I'm saying? And it has come forward and forward and forward and forward. And now you are the one who has to say, I'm healing all that was behind me, and I am opening a path of healing to all that is to come. Yeah, it's a
Well, I'll
big
tell you,
job.
mine was the opposite.
Mm,
I just wanted to go back to where I came from, my origin. And
mm-hmm,
it was so loving, so light, so beautiful.
mm,
But coming back constantly to do the work of breaking through with the ancestors
mm-hmm,
was like, it was challenging because it was so old.
hmm,
And it didn't really make that much sense coming from where I was coming from, because it was such a huge gap. So it was
mm,
like, I know this is the truth.
mm-hmm,
This is the falsehood of the planet and the
mm-hmm,
cultures.
mm-hmm,
And how can I bridge that gap when you know what is the truth, and
mm-hmm,
you know this is the other stuff. And I really believe that a lot of people are going through that now, because
mm-hmm.
I still believe that there is lots of breakthroughs that need to be had.
Oh yeah.
And how do we make peace? It's not just about surrendering, because the experience that I had, honestly, because I think experiences are also based on one's own personalities.
Mm-hmm,
So the experiences that I had were very loving, they were very gentle,
mm-hmm,
because I always just saw myself as this very child of the universe, of source or whatever.
mm-hmm,
And I was like, I just don't know how to deal with that,
mm,
because I know how to deal with love and lightness and understanding and logic, but I don't know how to deal with such, like, it was definitely not incest, but
mm-hmm,
it's more like things that are so primitive, things
mm-hmm,
like gender inequality. you
mm-hmm,
know they're so primitive, actually.
mm-hmm,
And even like discrimination, like I remember when there was the black movement last year during lockdown.
mm-hmm.
My first reaction to this was, seriously, you're still talking about this?
Yeah,
You
absolutely.
still haven't gotten over this?
No, you can't, because you're being murdered every day, because you're being prejudiced against every day,
No, no, no. I'm not
because,
talking about the black community, yeah, Louisa. I'm talking about that as an issue. Like, seriously?
oh, why is it still going on, is your
Yeah,
question. Okay.
exactly. It's
Why
like,
is why is it still going on? Here's what I think, or rather my prayer. Most of the time, people think of themselves as more animal than spirit.
right,
Okay. And
right.
so they will cite in a minute that, male animals rape female animals, big animals eat little ones, and they say we're at the top of the food chain. There can be no light without shadow. There's all these things that justifies remaining at that vibrational level. That's a particular vibrational level, I think. And I think that trying to raise us up, I have been invoking for a couple of things. I'd like to see the end of human cruelty. I'd like to see the end of human cruelty. I want to know, they tell us that we only use 20% of our brain. I want to know what we would change into if we had access to another 10%. You
Well, I
know,
think
if,
honestly, one of the ways that we can stop this human cruelty is also to stop being cruel to animals and plants,
yeah.
because that is our most, like the hindbrain. We have our instinctual responses,
Mm-hmm.
and the way that we are cruel, forget about to each other, to
Mm-hmm.
animals themselves. And I'm not talking about domesticated animals. I'm talking about the way that we treat animals for food, for greed, for consumption,
Mm-hmm.
for all of
Mm-hmm.
that. We
Mm-hmm.
need to rethink that in
That's
order
right.
to reset our own hindbrains.
Yep. Absolutely. We need to reset that limbic brain back here that thinks we're still uh, the claws and the teeth and the fur. That part of us really, that they say that that's where survival instinct lives. Okay. But one of the problems is we've created a world where that level of survival instinct isn't needed as much as it when we were wrestling the saber-toothed tiger, you know, that was needed. That's one of the things I say about testosterone, you know. Um, when a man had to go out and wrestle a beast, that was a fair application of that. But today, manhood is expressed by how much money you got, how many cars you got, how many women
It's
you
the same
screwed.
thing in different
Yeah,
packaging, though, isn't it?
yeah, yeah. And it shouldn't be. It should, we got to find a better use for that which is natural to us. If it's natural, there should be it should evolve. How we apply it should evolve over time. We're not wrestling saber tooths anymore. What are we going to do with that energy? What we do with it is we make war, and we shouldn't. We shouldn't. You know, it's really so that's one of my regular prayers is that human beings will evolve into something that where we don't have to kill each other, where we don't feel that we have to exploit the planet. And then I take it the next step and I imagine what would life be like if whatever that destructive thing is, if we could turn it and put all of our consciousness on preservation, peace, beauty, etc.
But I think that's the leap that we need to make. And I think it's difficult and it's not difficult. And I think that we've just run out of time. So let's talk about this in our next session, because I think it's so valuable about
Okay.
how to do the reset.
Okay. All right, baby.